Arben Krasniqi, Luan Hoxha, and Ilir Dervishi arrived in Liverpool as strangers with no public records, no criminal history, and no reason to attract attention. Within 5 years, their unseen decisions would control drug routes, silence entire neighborhoods, and turn the city's docks into the heart of a hidden empire. What no one realized at the time was that these three names were about to become the most dangerous force Liverpool had ever faced, without a single shot being fired in public. Liverpool's skyline glittered under the cold night lights, masking a darker reality that thrived in the shadows. Beneath the bustling streets and busy docks, an invisible force was silently shaping the city's underworld. The Albanian Mafia, unknown to most citizens, had begun its calculated takeover. What started as small, almost invisible shipments of drugs through the port quickly grew into something much more organized and dangerous. These were not impulsive criminals. Every move was precise, every step meticulously planned. Ordinary residents went about their daily lives unaware that their neighborhoods were now the staging ground for one of Europe's most disciplined crime networks. Local gangs, initially operating independently, found themselves cornered. They were given a choice: cooperate under the Mafia's strict rules or face consequences that were swift and merciless. Many chose compliance, fearing what might happen if they resisted. Businesses, too, became pawns in this silent war. Cafes, shops, and warehouses were subtly integrated into the network's operations, used to launder money or conceal illegal activity. Even those who thought they were immune, who believed they were too small to matter, soon realized that ignoring the network was a dangerous gamble. The police were aware of some unusual activity, but evidence was fragmented, inconsistent, and often misleading. Investigators struggled to connect the dots, finding only traces of activity that hinted at a larger operation without revealing its true scope. To the casual observer, Liverpool remained unchanged: bustling streets, lively nightlife, and ordinary people going about their lives. Yet underneath, a carefully constructed web of fear, power, and control was taking shape. The leaders of the Albanian Mafia were shadows, invisible figures whose presence was felt but never directly seen. They communicated through intermediaries, ensuring their identities remained secret and their influence unchallenged. Their methods were calculated to instill fear without leaving evidence. Every shipment that arrived at the docks, every deal that changed hands, and every act of intimidation was part of a larger strategy designed to consolidate power. By the time outsiders began to sense the magnitude of the operation, it had already embedded itself deeply into the city's criminal fabric. Residents, unaware of the danger lurking just beneath their feet, continued their routines, oblivious to the silent war being waged around them. The Albanian Mafia's rise in Liverpool was not marked by flashy violence or public chaos. It was quiet, methodical, and ruthless. A slow takeover that left communities unaware until the network's grip was firmly established. The city, with all its history and culture, had become the perfect breeding ground for a crime empire that operated with precision, secrecy, and an almost invisible hand. Every corner of the docks, every back alley, every unsuspecting street became part of a network designed to endure, expand, and dominate. By the end of this first chapter in the city's darkest story, Liverpool had unknowingly fallen under the shadow of one of the most dangerous criminal organizations Europe had ever seen. A network that would change the city forever. The Albanian Mafia's influence over Liverpool grew more evident with each passing month, their control stretching into every corner of the city's criminal landscape. Rival gangs that once operated independently began disappearing, quietly removed from the streets through a combination of intimidation, violence, and carefully orchestrated attacks. At first, these incidents seemed random, but investigators soon noticed a chilling pattern. The victims were always those who resisted cooperation or challenged the Mafia's authority. Each act of violence was executed with surgical precision, leaving no evidence behind, no fingerprints, no witnesses willing to speak. Fear became the mafia's most powerful tool. Rumors spread quickly among Liverpool's criminal community. Whispers of an organized, ruthless syndicate with international ties filled the underground, and loyalty became the only currency that mattered. Those who tried to operate outside the mafia's rules found themselves facing consequences that ranged from destruction of property to sudden disappearances. Business owners, once confident in their independence, were forced to comply. Protection fees became standard, demanded not just through threats, but through a sense of inevitability. The docks, Liverpool's lifeline for trade, became the mafia's playground. Corrupt officials and insiders provided a protective cover, allowing shipments of drugs, weapons, and cash to flow through the port with minimal scrutiny. The network operated like a silent shadow, invisible to the public, but omnipresent to those involved. Law enforcement struggled to respond. Standard policing methods proved ineffective against an organization that planned years in advance, anticipated every move, and punished betrayal with ruthless efficiency. Detectives discovered that even seemingly minor crimes were often connected to larger operations. A stolen shipment, a broken deal, or a missing person could all point to the same invisible hand guiding the city's underworld. The Albanian Mafia's reputation grew, not just for its wealth and power, but for its meticulous strategy. Every act of intimidation, every strategic alliance, and every calculated strike reinforced the network's dominance. The city itself began to feel the subtle effects of this silent occupation. Neighborhoods once vibrant now carried a sense of unease. Residents avoided streets after dark, wary of violence that might strike without warning. Ordinary people who had once dismissed rumors as exaggeration slowly realized that the threat was real and omnipresent. International connections added another layer of complexity. The true cost of the Albanian Mafia's control over Liverpool became tragically clear in the lives of ordinary people. Neighborhoods near the docks, once vibrant and full of community, had become landscapes of fear and suspicion. Families reported neighbors disappearing without explanation, friends vanishing after small disagreements, and local business owners intimidated into silence. The attacks were sudden, leaving little evidence behind and sending a message that defiance carried severe consequences. Residents learned to avoid certain streets after dark, cautious of shadows that could hide danger. Even those who had never engaged with the criminal world felt the pressure, understanding instinctively that resisting the mafia could bring disastrous results. Police investigations revealed a chilling pattern. Most victims were connected to minor disputes, unpaid debts, or perceived betrayals. Yet the methods of punishment were disproportionate, almost theatrical in their cruelty. Abductions, beatings, and in some cases, disappearances without a trace were used to ensure compliance. No one wanted to challenge an organization that operated with such precision and secrecy. The psychological toll on the community was immense. Fear infiltrated homes, conversations, and schools. Children grew up learning caution. Adults spoke in hushed tones, and even casual interactions were weighed carefully for risk. Trust became a rare commodity, and the invisible hand of the mafia shaped every decision, from where to walk to whom to associate with. Witnesses to crimes were silent, too afraid to come forward. Those who attempted to report suspicious activity often found themselves ignored or discredited, leaving law enforcement frustrated and communities feeling abandoned. The network's influence extended beyond physical intimidation. It shaped social dynamics, creating an environment where loyalty was demanded and silence was rewarded. Detectives investigating the mafia discovered a level of sophistication that was almost overwhelming. Every act of intimidation was calculated to maintain order within the organization while keeping outsiders terrified and compliant. Threats were subtle but unmistakable, leaving no room for misunderstanding. Even minor infractions or perceived disrespect could trigger severe consequences, ensuring that the city's criminal hierarchy remained intact. The human stories were heartbreaking. Families quietly mourned loved ones who had vanished, never knowing whether they were alive or dead. Business owners lived under constant stress, balancing their operations with fear of attracting attention from the wrong people. The streets, once bustling with casual energy, felt tense, each passerby measuring potential danger with every step. The mafia's grip extended into local politics and institutions, creating a web of influence that further protected their operations. Corruption and coercion ensured that key decisions in the city were subtly aligned with the organization's interests. Liverpool's residents found themselves navigating a hidden battlefield where every action could have consequences they could neither predict nor control. By the time authorities fully realized the scale of the human suffering inflicted by the Albanian Mafia, the damage was deeply embedded in the city's social fabric. Lives had been lost, trust had been eroded, and neighborhoods had been fundamentally altered. The Albanian Mafia was more than a criminal organization. It was a silent force of terror, shaping Liverpool not only through money and violence, but through the fear and compliance of the people who called the city home. The shadows of their actions lingered, leaving communities to grapple with trauma that would take years to heal. The first real breakthrough in the investigation came when a minor member of the Albanian Mafia, tired of living in constant fear, decided to cooperate with authorities. His decision marked a turning point, offering an unprecedented glimpse into the inner workings of a network that had remained largely invisible until that moment. What he revealed was both shocking and meticulously organized. At the top of the hierarchy were leaders who were almost mythic in their elusiveness. They never appeared in public, communicated only through trusted intermediaries, and maintained a level of secrecy that made them nearly untouchable. Below them were a series of lieutenants, each responsible for a specific aspect of the operation: drug distribution, money laundering, enforcement, and logistics. Every member of the organization had a defined role, and every action was carefully monitored to prevent mistakes or betrayal. The minor member described the use of encrypted communication methods, secret meeting points, and coded language that made interception by law enforcement extraordinarily difficult. Meetings were held in abandoned warehouses, secluded properties, or temporary safe houses, each chosen to minimize exposure. Even the smallest decisions like moving cash, coordinating shipments, or recruiting new members were subject to oversight from higher-ranking figures. Investigators began to map out the network, slowly understanding the scale of the operation. It was not just a local gang controlling street-level crime. It was a sophisticated organization operating with military-like precision. The Mafia's operations extended beyond Liverpool, with connections spanning multiple European countries, providing both resources and escape routes for those in leadership positions. Financial transactions were carefully structured to hide the flow of money, often moving through a chain of shell companies and offshore accounts that complicated efforts to track illegal profits. Law enforcement quickly realized that dismantling the network would require patience, strategy, and coordination on an unprecedented scale. The minor member also revealed the organization's methods for maintaining control and loyalty. Rewards were given for compliance and exceptional performance, while punishments for perceived disloyalty were severe and often permanent. This created an atmosphere where members operated with both fear and respect, ensuring obedience and preventing internal rebellion. Investigators could see how the Mafia had been able to operate unnoticed for so long. It was disciplined, adaptable, and aware of its surroundings. Every action was calculated to preserve the leadership's anonymity while expanding influence. Communities that had felt the indirect effects of the network began to understand the depth of its reach. Families of victims, local business owners, and even some public officials realized they had been entangled in a system far more extensive than anyone had imagined. A testimony of this single insider allowed law enforcement to connect previously fragmented evidence into a coherent picture of the Mafia's hierarchy, operations, and vulnerabilities. For the first time, authorities had a tangible understanding of the organization they were up against. The revelations confirmed what many had feared. Liverpool had been under the control of a highly organized and disciplined criminal empire, and the fight to dismantle it would require strategy, courage, and an unrelenting commitment to uncover the truth. This breakthrough did not just expose the organization's structure. It illuminated the challenges and dangers ahead, setting the stage for a high-stakes confrontation between law enforcement and one of Europe's most elusive criminal networks. Tension in Liverpool reached a new peak as law enforcement intensified their efforts to dismantle the Albanian Mafia. Surveillance teams, undercover agents, and financial investigators worked around the clock, attempting to trace shipments, uncover hidden accounts, and monitor key figures in the organization. Every operation carried enormous risk. The Mafia was not only aware of the authorities' presence, but adapted quickly to any perceived threat. Their communication systems were sophisticated and constantly evolving. Encrypted messages, burner phones, and clandestine meetings ensured that even the most persistent investigators struggled to stay ahead. Members of the organization were trained to spot surveillance and detect infiltration, making undercover work a high-stakes endeavor. Any mistake could result in exposure, retaliation, or even death. Despite these dangers, law enforcement began to gather crucial intelligence. The use of covert technology allowed them to monitor movements, track transactions, and identify previously unknown members of the network. Yet even with this progress, the Mafia remained a step ahead. When raids were anticipated, operations would be shifted at the last minute. When shipments were discovered, alternative routes had already been established. Every contingency was planned in advance, demonstrating the network's remarkable discipline and foresight. The stakes grew higher as investigators uncovered connections between the Mafia and corrupt insiders within the city. Certain officials at the docks and local businesses had been compromised, creating blind spots in the authorities' efforts. These revelations forced law enforcement to exercise extreme caution. A single misstep could compromise months of intelligence gathering or put lives in immediate danger. The city itself became a high-stakes chessboard. Streets, warehouses, and ports were monitored, while the Mafia simultaneously observed law enforcement activity, adapting in real time. Each side attempted to anticipate the other's moves, leading to a tense standoff where one wrong decision could change everything. The psychological strain on investigators was immense. The constant pressure, combined with the fear of retaliation, created an atmosphere of relentless tension. Despite this, breakthroughs began to emerge. Minor errors by lower-ranking members provided valuable insights into the network's operations. Patterns in shipments, communication habits, and financial flows were pieced together, revealing weaknesses that had previously gone unnoticed. These insights fueled a growing determination within law enforcement, who realized that dismantling the organization required patience, strategy, and coordination across multiple agencies. Meanwhile, the Albanian Mafia remained vigilant, aware that the walls were closing in. Leaders issued new orders to maintain secrecy, instructed lieutenants to monitor loyalty, and reinforced protocols for safe operations. Adaptability became their strongest weapon, allowing the network to survive even as law enforcement began to close the net. The tension in Liverpool's underworld was palpable. The city was caught in the silent battle between a highly organized criminal empire and authorities determined to restore order. Every day brought new risks, new revelations, and new strategies on both sides. For residents, the danger remained largely invisible, yet it influenced daily life in subtle ways. By the end of this chapter, it was clear that the struggle was far from over. The Albanian Mafia had proven that it could evolve, adapt, and survive under immense pressure, while law enforcement had discovered that taking down such an organization required patience, intelligence, and the courage to face threats that most could not even imagine. The turning point in Liverpool's battle against the Albanian Mafia arrived with a meticulously planned sting operation. Months of surveillance, undercover work, and financial investigation had culminated in a coordinated effort to strike at the organization's core. Law enforcement agencies, working in collaboration across multiple departments, targeted warehouses, safe houses, and known hideouts. The goal was to seize shipments, uncover financial records, and capture high-ranking members without alerting the rest of the network. The operation revealed a level of sophistication and preparation that was both impressive and terrifying. Warehouses were heavily fortified with surveillance cameras, coded locks, and lookout personnel. Even seemingly abandoned properties contained hidden compartments and escape routes designed to protect assets and personnel from intrusion. Officers moved with extreme caution, aware that a single mistake could trigger violent retaliation. As raids were executed, the scope of the Mafia's operations became increasingly apparent. Stockpiles of drugs, firearms, and cash were discovered, along with documents detailing financial transactions, shipment routes, and coded communications. These records provided investigators with crucial insight into how deeply the network had infiltrated Liverpool's streets and businesses. The arrests sent shockwaves through the criminal underworld. Mid-level lieutenants were taken into custody, their absence creating immediate instability within the organization. Members who had once felt untouchable now confronted the reality that law enforcement had penetrated their operations. The psychological impact of the raids was as significant as the physical seizure of assets. Yet even amid the success, it became clear that the top leaders had anticipated the possibility of such an operation. Key figures had already vanished, leaving behind empty chairs at the helm of the organization. Their disappearance demonstrated the Mafia's ability to adapt and evade capture, even when faced with overwhelming pressure. For law enforcement, the sting was both a victory and a lesson. It showcased the effectiveness of intelligence-driven operations, yet highlighted the resilience of a criminal network that could recover and reorganize when leaders escaped. The streets of Liverpool briefly felt a sense of relief as the immediate threat from visible Mafia members diminished. Communities that had lived under fear began to notice the absence of some key enforcers, and small businesses cautiously returned to normal operations. However, the shadow of the organization remained. Investigators knew that the arrests were only the beginning of a longer, more complex battle to dismantle the Mafia entirely. Even as evidence was processed and court cases prepared, the organization's infrastructure remained largely intact, ready to adapt, recruit, and continue operations once the immediate pressure subsided. The sting operation marked a critical chapter in Liverpool's fight against organized crime. It revealed the network's scale, sophistication, and influence, while also demonstrating vulnerabilities that could be exploited in future actions. The balance of power had shifted, if only slightly, but the city's underworld remained a dangerous and unpredictable environment. The Albanian Mafia had been partially exposed, and their control weakened. Yet the operation underscored one stark truth. Even when law enforcement strikes decisively, a criminal empire built on secrecy, discipline, and adaptability is never easily destroyed. Liverpool's battle against this network was far from over, but the sting operation had provided a glimpse of hope, proving that meticulous planning, courage, and intelligence could challenge even the most entrenched criminal organizations. Liverpool slowly began to surface from the grip of fear that had defined its underworld for years. After the major arrests and seizures, the city felt quieter, almost cautious, as if unsure whether the danger had truly passed or was simply waiting to return. The Albanian Mafia had been wounded, but not erased. Its influence still lingered in subtle ways, hidden within businesses, financial systems, and personal loyalties that had been built over time. Law enforcement remained on high alert, aware that criminal networks rarely disappear completely. Instead, they change shape, adapt, and wait for opportunities to rebuild. For residents, life gradually returned to a sense of normalcy, though the memory of what had happened remained deeply etched into the community. People spoke more openly about the fear they had lived with, the disappearances that had gone unexplained, and the silence that had protected criminals for so long. The psychological scars were undeniable. Families who had lost loved ones still searched for closure, and neighborhoods once controlled by intimidation worked to rebuild trust and safety. Businesses that had operated under pressure now faced the challenge of disentangling themselves from past connections, fearful that any remaining ties could bring consequences. Authorities took hard lessons from the case. They recognized how a disciplined international criminal organization could infiltrate a major city without drawing attention. Traditional policing methods had proven insufficient against a network that relied on secrecy, financial sophistication, and loyalty enforced through fear. New strategies were implemented, focusing on financial intelligence, international cooperation, and long-term surveillance. The case reshaped how organized crime was understood and fought in the region. Despite these efforts, uncertainty remained. Some of the mafia's top leaders were never found, their absence fueling speculation about whether they had escaped to rebuild elsewhere. Rumors persisted of hidden assets and sleeper cells waiting quietly in the background. The idea that the network could return, stronger and more cautious, continued to haunt both authorities and residents. Liverpool's experience became a warning, not just for the city, but for others across Europe. It showed how organized crime thrives in silence, exploiting trust, fear, and opportunity. The exposure of the Albanian Mafia did not bring a dramatic end, but rather a sobering realization of how fragile safety can be when criminal power operates unseen. Communities learned the importance of vigilance, cooperation, and refusing to look away from uncomfortable truths. The city moved forward, wiser and more aware, determined not to allow such a network to regain control. Yet, the shadow of the past remained a reminder that organized crime leaves lasting marks long after the headlines fade. Liverpool's story did not end with complete victory or defeat. It ended with awareness, resilience, and the understanding that the fight against hidden power is ongoing. The Albanian Mafia's grip had loosened, but its legacy served as a chilling lesson in how quietly danger can grow and how much effort it takes to bring it into the light.